Hello to everyone, and thank you again. I thoroughly enjoyed our time last week, and we got a lot of information from the workshops. We'll be making sure you have a good opportunity in the workshops again today, so that you can participate the same level as we did before. I'm just going to get my presentation up on screen. Let me see. Just take me a minute to do this. Okay. And it should be on screen now. Is that right, Irina?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to start with some reflections from day one. You might remember I gave you a little bit of homework, something to think about. What you see is the purposes of secondary schooling. These 2, or in some countries 3 years, the senior years, the final years. What's the purpose? We're going to just to take a moment to consider what are the emerging principles. We don't have to go too deeply into this because we'll be working on these in the final 2 days. And we really want to talk about Lithuania throughout tonight. When you consider what we talked about last week and then what we'll see tonight, what are the changes that, the key changes that need to happen for Lithuania in terms of secondary schooling? Of course, there could be many changes, but what's at the top of your mind of the things that need to change? We're going to look at examples of the bulk of the night is looking at examples of secondary education from 6 different countries or jurisdictions. We're going to look at credit. We're also going to look at assessment and credentialing options that are used, and I'll explain all that as we go through. So on reflection from last time, what is the purpose of secondaries, the senior secondary years? Is it to enhance knowledge and skills already acquired in basic education? In other words, it's just 2 or 3 more years just added on to basic education. It's just a bit more basic education. Or is it particularly to prepare or qualify students for university or for some other tertiary level, maybe work as well? Is it to find a pathway to a post-school destination? In other words, enable the student to come to terms with where they want to head and where they see themselves going after they finish that final year 12. Or is it particularly 2 years in which the country prepares certain skilled workforce? So in other words, it's really where you focus on the big needs that you have in the country and make sure students take the courses that deliver that. So in other words, it could be something else, of course, too, but depending on what you see the view of the purpose of secondary schooling, that'll help you determine what's mandatory, what's not, where there's flexibility, where there's not, which subject areas are included and which aren't, and even the nature of those subject areas. Are they quite different to what was experienced in basic education? I'm thinking, Rasa and Irina, we could use the chat line for people to write down their views there.
Yes, sure.
And alternatively, what we can do is get people who particularly want to say something to signal that with let me just see. If I just take this off for a moment, I'm working out, stop sharing. Okay. So we could use the chat line for people to write what they see as the purpose of secondary schooling, or if you press the participants list there, the participants tag at the bottom, that'll show we've got 64 participants, and you can use that to raise your hand if you want to say something. So if you want to offer your thoughts about the purpose of secondary schooling, you can. I'm not sure if you can do that when we can't see you. Maybe we can. I don't know. It's something I need to learn. So, have we got any statements that anyone would like to make? Any participants would like to share their view of what the purpose of secondary schooling is, the senior years? I'm looking at you, Natalia. I think from last time you were keen, so I don't want to put any pressure on you to speak, but I know you were keen. You even left us with a little message there at the end. So you may want to say something or write something. Of course, others as well.
May I start?
Yes, please. Thanks, Asta.
Yeah, if Natalia doesn't start.
Yes, I'm here. Morning, everybody. Thank you. I'm pleased, feel so it's okay.
So, Asta, let's hear from you first, and then we'll go to Natalia. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
In these groups where we worked last time, we heard the question not only about the purpose of secondary education, but the another idea which shadowed all our discussions was who is responsible to formulate this goal of secondary education. Does it belong to the field of educational experts, or should be the political decision made? Because in our discussions, we had the different boundaries where we just formulated that we know what should be, but we are not sure that our politicians could accept one or another way. For example, who can participate or just learn on the level of secondary education? What are the results of secondary education acceptable to school pupils or students or parents or institutions of higher education? So I would like to add one more aspect to this summary of the first day.
Thank you. And of course, you didn't mention the business sector, so it may be the business sector too might want to have a view about the kind of skills and capabilities, particularly at the high end. And you're right, politicians, the tertiary sector, their view, and educators. And is it all of those, or are some of them privileged, given greater privileged? I can see that Elias has made a statement there about the same question being always asked: does the school have to develop universal skills or prepare the student to serve the market? It seems that in Lithuania, the school is intended only for the students to enter university. And that's a good point. Is it more than that? Is it prepare them for whatever destination they take, given and really setting them up for lifelong learning? Natalia, are you willing, ready to speak as well, or you can pass if you want, no problem.
Yeah, my pleasure, yeah. But not now. I think after the presentation, we can continue the discussion.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Anyone else? I'm just looking to see if we've got any other hands up.
It's morning here, still morning. So we need your presentation to wake up. And afterwards, there will be hundreds of questions. So probably.
Wait a minute, Irena. This was homework. You wouldn't accept that from students saying, I'm still tired. I can't give my homework. That's okay. We can come back to this. And even when you're in your groups, you can discuss this. Okay, now I'm going to share the screen again. The other thing I want you to be thinking about are what principles are emerging from the discussions that we held on day one. What I mean by that is when you're going to make some decisions, what are the things that you really want to hold strongly to? Is it about equity? Is it about student agency? Is it about flexibility? All of those things, those principles are what you base your decisions on, and they will help you later on in deciding structure, and really, largely, that's part of purpose as well. I'm going to stop again, and I'm going to ask you to see if there's anyone that wants to be bold enough to say what they think are the main things, maybe one or two things that have to change, the changes that you'd like to see from the current system of senior secondary schooling in Lithuania. What are the things that you know have to be fixed? One person there in their comments talked about, at the moment, it's preparation. It seems like it's preparation for university. Are you comfortable with that? Or is that limiting what the possibilities are for the secondary system that you can build?
I think I'm brave enough to speak. So good morning, everyone. I think the strangest thing is that universities blame secondary education that they do not prepare students. The preparation for university is not enough at schools. Schools at the same time, they declare all the time that we are just, our aim is to enter university and to pass exams. So the blaming one side and the other, there is some kind of misunderstanding. And I think that a clear cut should be made. Like our secondary education should have maybe that flexibility we talked about. Like some of students, like taking one model, they would be prepared for university, the others for the market. So that's my point from the first day.
Okay, thank you. I noticed Vaina has written that it seems like in law, the purpose is written about secondary education to help a person to acquire general subject, socio-cultural, technological literacy, moral, national and civic maturity, the basics of professional competence. So it seems like it's basics plus. It's a build on basics, an extension of basics, not something quite different. That's what the education law says. Of course, it doesn't mean laws can't change, or you might want to interpret that differently. It's open to interpretation, I guess is what I'm saying. Okay, any other people that, Irina, you look like you're very keen to say something. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may, I think it's okay with the law and with declarations that we usually have in our documents about the purpose, about the competences. The problem is that assessment. I mean, the way we measure these competences at the end, they do not always correspond to the aims. Yes. So we should speak about the alignment of our aims with assessment. The way we assess these competences is an issue here in Lithuania, and we all know that one of the mostly criticized aspects of our education system, examinations.
Yes, so that's you'd like to see. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're saying what needs to change is there has to be better alignment. And if we value these things, and it says we do in law, then we should be assessing them. And that might mean we assess them in a different way to the kind of exams we have at the moment. Is that a fair?
Yes, exactly.
Summary? Yeah. Okay. I notice you've got your microphone off, Asta. Do you want to say something about changes, or you?
I cannot stop reacting on the word examinations. You know, it's like a red flag for me. But I'm not sure that examination is the problem, you know, because it solves a lot of issues too. For example, I see in front of my computer Giedrė Pačėsienė, who represents the higher education system in the ministry. And I would like to ask her, does examination as the system is more problem, or the idea and the procedure which helps to organize finishing the school and entering the university at the same time? We save a lot of administrative and financial resources at one point. Another aspect is that when we get back to the practice of examinations, indeed, on the level of school, on the level of our common understanding, examination is like the routine procedure. Everybody understands that if I enter any kind of educational process, I have to finish it in one or another way. What kind of tools we would use? In one or another words, it will be assessment. But the another issue which we have, I suppose, is on the level of demographical issue, because there are only how to say, not it's not about English, but about the only 28,000 of students continue learning in a secondary education level. So it means that we still hope that most of all would enter universities. Universities need such amount of students to have their own work. So the problem is that we let everybody to come to the level of secondary education with the same rules. They don't have different paths to finish school and to have the opportunity to enter university or college or any other higher institution.
Yeah. So you've got a dual purpose there by the sound of it. You've got clearly the universities need students and they need to be at a certain level to be able to make that pathway smooth and deal with the rigor of higher education. But you've got another cohort of students that really are bound for they're heading elsewhere. They've got other pathways. And therefore, the system needs to recognize that to keep them engaged and to not just give them more of the same that they had in basic education, but actually fulfill what you say in the what's said in the law there about all those other competencies that they can use in work and so on. Giedrė, you've got your microphone off. Does that mean you want to say something?
Yes.
I might let you be the last one before we move to the next session. Oh no, Irina wants to say something. Is that right?
Thank you. If I could react to ask this question Yes, we have such funding system for higher education studies that a student is a certain amount of funding, and when he decides to enter university and when he gets to university and starts his studies, that means that a certain amount of funding comes to certain university. And of course, when we have, I wonder about maybe less than 10 years, but such funding system. So that means that according to this system, we need some comparable evaluation of students' secondary education, just to measure and to compare their results. And that's another question. Another question that our government has decided that we should have free bachelor studies. And what does it mean? That means that quite a big amount of state-funded places, and that gives an illusion for students that after secondary education, I have quite good chances to enter higher education institutions, and it doesn't depend, am I prepared or whether I'm not sufficiently prepared for higher education. We'll see when I get to the education, to higher education system. And on one hand, yes, if we still have such kind of funding system for higher education, we need some comparable results to compare student preparation for higher education studies. But I think that it is a problem when we have funding very much connected with preparation, with admission to higher education system. If we could separate the funding system from admission system, that would be nice, because the higher education institutions would receive their freedom just to administrate admission for themselves. And of course, if it would be nice to have another possibility to admit secondary, to admit pupil from a secondary education system, but still I don't have an idea how to let higher education universities and colleges to admit and to enroll students without having maturity exams, because the secondary education institutions are very different, and very different with their results.
They're around the world. There are universities using alternative methods. There are alternative methods, and some still using exams or using examinations as part of the data. Irina, Vilma, is it? So where is Vilma? Vilma, you'll have to be the last one. Where are you?
Yes, here I am. I hope you can see me. Okay. Hello, everybody. It's nice to join the conversation. And I just would like to make a comment with encouragement. And my encouragement would be to my colleagues to allow ourselves being provoked by Phil. Because what I think we are doing in our national conversations and discussions, we always try to be protective towards our system. And our system, in a way, is well established in terms that everybody understands how things work. And it's very difficult to provoke yourself to start thinking out of the box, as we say. And what I think we need to clarify for ourselves, what this constant reminder of the market means to us. And I really liked your comment, Phil, when Irena last time asked you what you mean by the market, and you said that the market are the students. And for us, it's a very difficult national conception, because the market for us are employers who actually always remind us what they expect. And they remind the students, the families, and the parents what they expect. But education should think what students expect. The other notion that I think is very innovative for ourselves is student agency. We really have it as a new term, and we don't get the grasp of the content. We speak a lot about student-centered approach, and student-centered approach changed the practice in the classroom a little bit, I would say. Still, there's more to improve. But student agency, if I understand correctly, is student-centered content. Our students, as you again mentioned last time, usually choose arts. Why do they choose arts? Because they feel the need for self-expression, and they hope they will do something with it in their lives later. Our students choose sport, but our employers say, no, sport is not employable. But they are wrong, because sport as an area is industry, and it's a well-paid
growing one too. It's a growing area. Absolutely, health.
Exactly.
The whole health industry.
So nationally, in Lithuania, employers have stereotypes what the futures of the students will be in the job market, but the student market is different. And I think that it might be good to think a little bit philosophically when we speak about content. What is student agency for us? How can we focus the content towards the students? And then probably discuss a little bit about how do we change the system, not only the curriculum. So that's my comment.
That's a very helpful passageway into our next session, into the rest of the day, actually. And one thing I do have to say, and I've said this before, Irina and Asta, Vilma, Irina have heard me say this. I come to provoke you a little bit, to give you some alternative thinking. But usually I get on the plane and I go away. You're left to make those decisions. I can't make those for you, and I shouldn't. So you're right. I'm here to throw in ideas, to give you alternatives to think of, but ultimately this is your curriculum to design, your senior secondary structure to design. And it will be based on your needs and interests, not mine. Okay, I'm going to put the slides up again, and we're going to move on. I'm going to show you now just some approaches from other countries. So these are some countries' jurisdictions. When I say jurisdictions, what I mean are their states or provinces within a country. So not the country itself, but part of the country. So we're going to look at Finland, which you can take 3 to 4 years actually in those senior years in Finland. In South Australia, it's a 2-year, it's part of a state in Australia. It's got a 2-year model. By the way, I've chosen these because they're different to each other, and they will show you some alternatives maybe to your own. Ireland has 2 to 3 years. I can explain why that is, that difference there. British Columbia, one of the provinces in Canada, where Vancouver's the capital there. Singapore is 2 to 3 years, depending on the pathway you take. And New Zealand is a 3 years. In other words, it's for those that take 3 years, it's year 10, 11, and 12. Okay, so I'm just going to talk through each of these. I'm going to go through this reasonably quickly. I'll have a bit of time at the end for questions, clarification, but then we want to break and put you into your, at 11:15, to put you, we'll have a break and then you'll go into your groups to discuss what you think are the, really what the strengths or the limitations of these different approaches. So after basic education in Finland, students choose an either academic or a vocational track. By the way, in some countries, academic track is seen to be of much higher status than vocational track, but unless I've been told by my colleagues in Finland, there's, you know, vocational track is respected. It's not like it's not respected. There's a minimum of 75 what they call courses to take over those years. There's 51 compulsory. It can be more, less, or 51, up to 51. It depends on the maths track. So if you take higher level of maths, you do more maths courses. And there's a specialization course electives that are at advanced level, and they're advanced from the existing subject, compulsory subjects. You have to take at least 10 of those. You can switch between academic and vocational. In some countries, that's very difficult to do once you're on a vocational track. Singapore, for example, pretty much if you've been put in the vocational side, that's it. You know, that's heavily tracked in Singapore. Actually, even from primary school, it's heavily tracked, the pathway you take. But in Finland, it's interchangeable. Maths and national language are at different levels. So they set it, you know, at basic and general and advanced levels. Students can opt for a lower level exam. So you could be doing the advanced course in mathematics, but if you think, you know, when it comes to examination time that you're not going to do as well, you can actually drop down and do the, if you like, the, I don't want to say this in any negative way, but the easier assessment for the general course. So there's compulsory, there's specialization, which is built on the compulsory subjects, and there's applied, which is really applied courses which are integrated. They're integration of different subject areas. You can also do diplomas while you're in those years in areas like theatre and dance. So in other words, you can just add diplomas onto your existing certificate that you graduate with. South Australia has its certificate of education called the SACE. Students need 200 credit points, and so every subject area has a certain number of points between year 11 and year 12, and you've got to get, by the end of year 12, you have to have had enough courses to earn 200 credit points. 50 of those come from a personal learning plan, a literacy requirement, a numeracy requirement, and a research project. So you've got to do a literacy course, a numeracy course, and a research project, and a personal learning plan. So after you've done all of that, 150 points have to come from other courses. 90 credits come from grade 11 and 12 subjects over, I can't quite see what that says, over 2 years, sorry. Sorry, I don't know what's happening there. There we go. 60 credits from grade 12 subjects. And there's external assessment of those, but only, that's in year 12, that's only makes up 30%. So 70% of your final assessment is school-based, based on what you do at school. 30% is the exam at the end of grade 12. The students must have completed an assessed personal learning plan in either grade 10 or grade 11. So that's interesting. That's basically in that year, that final year of basic education, year 10, grade 10, or in their first year of senior secondary, they design a personal plan. In other words, they're thinking of their future. That's a requirement for them to do that. They must complete a research project that is assessed as part of the overall work in either grade 11 or 12. So you can see they've got a mix there of coursework and doing a plan, their own plan, and doing a research project. And it's very much about assessment along the way. Only 30% is the final exam that contributes. In Ireland, their final years are called the senior cycle. And it's an interesting approach here. After year 10, the student can decide whether they do a transition year. It's called a transition year, or move straight into the final 2 years of, that's why it could be 3 years. If you do a transition year between the end of basic education and then into secondary cycle, it could end up being 3 years. Students take 5 or more subjects. Most elect to take up to 7, just to make sure that they cover themselves for exams. The transition year, if they take that, it's exam free. So it enables students to do all different types of courses and includes work experience. So in other words, this helps the student to say, do I really want to transition to work? Or do I actually feel I can go on now? So it's really giving them a year to think out what they really want to do before they go one way or another. The 2-year cycle, students take 1 of 3 programs. So there's 3 tracks in the 2-year cycle. That's the leaving certificate that most do, the leaving vocational certificate, or the leaving applied certificate. The leaving certificate is the main program, and that's the academic pathway, 36 subject areas. Irish is the only subject area, and all subjects have 2 levels, ordinary and higher, except Irish and maths, which has an additional level that's below. So really that's for students that are progressing on, but really, you know, they probably have not acquired even what they should have acquired from basic education. Okay, British Columbia in Canada. It's called the BC Certificate of Education, or it's actually known as the Dogwood Diploma. Not sure where that name came from, but that's what they call it. That's what it's known as. They must pass 3 assessments, a grade 10 numeracy. So in other words, to actually get this certificate, you have to have passed your numeracy test in grade 10, grade 10 literacy test, and then a final literacy test in grade 12. So in other words, to get that certificate, when you hold that, leaving grade 12, it shows that you, apart from what subjects you do, you are literate and numerate. You have all that's needed in terms of numeracy and literacy. At least 8 credits are to be acquired over 3 years, and you get that from the subject areas you take. You can take those mandatory assessments in literacy, numeracy, you can take them up to 3 times to get your results. So you've done the grade 10 numeracy test and you didn't pass it, you didn't do as well as you'd like, you can go again and you can do it again a 3rd time. So in other words, they allow you to, by the time you finish year 12, you can have more than one attempt at getting the mark you want from those assessments. 52 credits come from mandatory subjects of the 80 credits. PE Health in grade 10, Science, so it's grade 10 to 12 in senior secondary in British Columbia. So PE Health in grade 10 only. Science you do in grade 10 and either 11 or 12. So you don't have, you could do it in grade 10 and 12. You don't have to do it in 11. Or you can do it every year, but you've got to do it in 2 grades within 10, 11, and 12. The same for maths. The same for language arts. The same for arts. And the same for applied design and technology. And you must do a career life education and career life connection course in grade 12. So even though the national language isn't mandatory in grade 12, you could do it in, for example, grade 10 and grade 11, you have to do a literacy test in grade 12. So that's a way that they just make sure, regardless of what language course you do, that you are doing a grade 12 literacy course. It's a bilingual country, so there's a French equivalent to this if you are in a French-speaking school. Okay, in Singapore, it's 2 to 3 years depending on the track you take. It's called pre-university. So once you finish secondary school ends at year 10, year 9, sorry, and there's an examination, and that determines which pathway you take. And it's all called pre-university, even if you're not going to university. Pre-university courses are provided in junior colleges, polytechnics, and institutes of technology. So that's 3 different types of, I guess, what you call senior secondary school: a college, a polytechnic, and an institute. The 3 of them offer different programs depending on what track you've been placed in following your exams at the end of what you would call in Lithuania basic education. The pathway is determined by your academic success at the end of grade 9. Junior college pathway has a focus on humanities, arts and languages, mathematics and science, and it's a pre-university preparation for the GCE A levels, the UK A levels, which are taken in the final year. So it's depending on what university course you take, you might end up doing 3 years of that. And it is really preparation for which of those disciplines you'll follow into university. Polytechnics are practical studies and diplomas in areas like tourism, business studies. There are some mandatory subjects that you would have to do, like English and mathematics, but largely it's about preparation for a diploma to go into some form of tertiary business course. And institutes are purely vocational courses. So it's a very heavily tracked. Once you're in one of these tracks, it's very difficult to move out of it and into one of the others. Okay, we're up to New Zealand. So New Zealand, it's actually called grades 11 and 13, but it's really equivalent to year 11 and 12. Their first year of school is broken up into different other levels. And so really their first year of school is more like year 2. And so everything is pushed back a bit in terms of what they call it. In Grade 11, that first year, if you like, of secondary, equivalent to grade 10, you do English, mathematics, and science. There's no mandatory subjects after that in the final 2 years. Okay, so the national language English is only in that what we would call grade 10, and then the 2 years afterwards, it's not mandatory. Students are assessed on the subjects taken against specified standards. So this is quite an interesting approach. Every subject has a set of standards. There are assessment tasks you do in class. There are exams that you sit that are provided externally based on different standards. And you accumulate standards that you've done a list of these standards. So it's really a description of what you can do, not a mark, not a credit point, but standards that are descriptive. But for each standard, there's a credit. So in other words, you do a hard standard that's worth 2 points compared to another standard, which is worth 1 point. Students, depending on what a degree of difficulty they do, determine at either level 1, 2, or 3 of the standards that they've demonstrated. So in other words, there's it's qualitative to a point, but it also involves some level of quantitative aggregation of numbers so that you end up with some kind of score. The internal assessments are externally moderated. So in other words, you can set assessments in your school to say your students acquired these standards, but then they'll be checked by external checkers that, that look across different schools to make sure that what judgments teachers are making are equivalent across the country. So there's a whole moderation process taking place. So I think we're ahead of time, Irina. So before we move to the task, what I want to do is stop sharing and see if there are any questions that people want to put into the chat line, or if people want to ask questions about any of those countries that I listed there, if you want clarity on anything. So if you put your hand up in one way or another, or write a question in the chat line. Soon we'll be moving after the break to discuss these and what you thought about them, which ones you found interesting and what made those interesting, or what you found as something you wouldn't like to consider. Plus, of course, considering Lithuania and how you compare to some of these examples. So have we got anyone that wants to ask a question about any of those or comment on any of those?
If I may ask you, Phil, just to emphasize and explain a little bit for people that in all of those countries that you were presenting, they have not a linear approach to organization of upper secondary, but they have this credit system modules, as it is called here in Lithuania. And it is only known for us from the university level and the vocational level, but in general education, we still have linear approach. It means that the subjects that students choose in grade 11, they have to study throughout a whole upper secondary for 2 years and finish it in grade 12. And they have no other choices. So And what is the difference with the credit system? If you can explain a little bit about that for participants.
Yeah, so in a lot of these, the emphasis is on the student choosing the courses that they are interested in and that they will do well in. So this is a strong point. If we listened in to the school principals in a lot of the schools in these countries, when they're advising students about what courses to take, they would say to them, take the course that you're interested in and that you are good at, because you will get maximum marks in those areas that you are good in, rather than taking courses that somebody tells you you should take, and you don't do well in that, you fail, if you like. They all involve different levels. And so it's not as if all students are doing the same course, and regardless, some that are brighter might do a little bit more. In many cases, they're different courses altogether. They're set at a different standard. The standards are applied, and therefore, if I'm a student, I'm choosing a course that really I am able to, I will learn in, of course, but it's not set at a level that is beyond my capabilities. And of course, partly what the reason for this is, they want the students to be engaged. They want them to come to school every day. They want them to be positive. They want them to work hard. They want them to feel well about themselves. And so the whole culture is about choosing the courses that equip you well. You've got the plan to make. Here are the credit points you need. You choose the subjects that, the combination of subjects, apart from the compulsory ones, but even the compulsory ones, they are typically set at different levels. So you choose the level that's best for you. And that means in year 11, you do this set of courses, and then you might choose in year 12 to do the same courses, a continuation of those courses. Some of them are set as year 11, 12 courses, and some are just set at year 11. They're just a year 11 course where you acquire the points. In some of these countries, in a lot of these countries, you're marking really the assessment side of it, that makes up your final mark, really only happens in that final year. Year 11 is really a preparation. Any of the tests you do, the assessments, are really trials to get you prepared for the kind of way you're going to be assessed in year 12. But in some countries, they do accumulate points along the way. And as I said, in New Zealand, you acquire standards. You demonstrate in, it's closer to formative assessment than summative assessment. You're actually acquiring it as you go. Okay, does that help, Irina? Yeah?
Yeah.
Partly when you go into the workshop, I'm sure part of it is, and on the table there, I'd like you to look at Lithuania and say, well, yeah, what's in what I've heard would be great for us to do, or what is it we really want to hold on strongly to? I think Asta's point earlier on that you've got a whole cohort of students that if they're doing the same course as highly capable students, depending on the teacher and the textbook and whatever, it could be very frustrating and emotionally draining for them, rather than doing courses they're really interested in doing. Okay, any other questions?
If I may just comment also and clarify a point, just coming back to the idea of equity and agency that we were talking before your presentation. Does it mean that, can we presume that having a credit system, we would kind of ensure the equity and agency for students? Well, I mean, that is a possibility to give a choice for student is an agency as well as an equity.
Yes.
So I think it's a step towards ensuring equity and agency at the same time. So these two not in opposition, they just complement each other. Right?
You're right. It's a balance here, and most of these countries, nearly all of these countries, strike a balance. They have compulsory courses, mandatory courses, to make sure every child leaves with an equivalent level of opportunity, not equal because they're going to be at different levels, but equivalent. So they've got the opportunity to get as well-rounded in literacy, numeracy, and maybe in science. But after that, it becomes agency to a point. It's not free, you know, choose any course you want to openly. You know, we talked about in the last time we met about a balanced approach. You choose, you know, you must choose some from the sciences. You must choose some from the arts. So you have all these different versions of agency. I mean, agency for some people means the students choose everything, and there's, you know, there's there's a whole suite of courses, and they choose their own individual pathway. I don't know of any country that's able to manage that. That's really difficult, and it could really only happen in a small school, in a school that you know, can be that flexible. But if, as a system, really you need to balance it, and you've got workforce expectations with teachers and so on. So you're right, Irina, there's agency, but not, it's more agency than what you've got now, I think most of those other would say. Natalia's asked the question, how is it possible to manage a minimum 75 courses like in Finland? It's more about the vocational area and less academic. No, it's what they define as courses are a bit different. It's over 3 years, excuse me, 3 to 4 years. And so some of those are short courses that, you know, don't last, you know, a full year. They might last a semester. And they're components of subjects. They're not like full courses in, as you might describe, a subject area. So it's the terminology is a bit misleading there, Natalia. What it just means is they're not just doing, if you like, 5 discipline areas. There's a whole mix of themes and structures around it. Valentina has just said, as I know, some courses are only 6 weeks long. So in other words, it's helping the student to build up capability in a particular field where you don't need 2 years of work on it. Okay, we got any other questions or comments?
I would like to ask about the entering the upper secondary education stage.
Yes.
If they are, as far as I understood, they are free to choose which course and on which level to study during these 2 or 3 years. But what are the rules or procedures to enter the secondary education? Do they have to pass any exams after basic education? Do they have to to show any credentials of basic education, or just they choose according to their own wish?
It's different for different countries and jurisdictions. In Singapore, you have to pass the Year 9 test. You all have to do the Year 9 test, and that determines which pathway you take after Year 9. In most of the other countries, there's not a final Year 10 assessment that you must, or Year 9 assessment that you must pass and get a certain mark in. In most of the countries, there's a discussion held between usually a teacher is allocated responsibility in Year 9 to help students going into Year 10, 11 and 12, or Year 11 and 12 to determine their course patterns, and in discussion with the parents. They usually have, the schools usually have briefing nights where they invite the parents along to say, here are the subjects, here are the courses, your child, they explain what the child has to do. And it's the counselling that's involved means they're encouraging students to take the courses that they're best suited for. And they try to discourage a child doing a course that really is too difficult for them. Some allow that to happen, but in most cases, it's really a negotiated, if you like, discussion between the school, the parents, and the student about which subjects they'll choose. And the teachers often play a role in that too. For example, if they've got students in their class in let's say in Year 10, that is tremendous at visual arts, they'll probably be saying to them, oh, you must stay on, you must do Year 11 and 12 visual arts. You could be an architect, you could go into the arts industry, you're talented, you're very good at it, you're going to do well in it. So the subject teachers often have these kind of discussions. They promote students going into their courses, and then the students choose. But there was a time when there was when you had a lot of students leaving at the end of basic education, or Year 10 in a lot of countries, or Year 9. When they were about 15, they would go off a lot would go to work, and very few would go on to university and therefore stay on for senior secondary or secondary, Year 11 and 12. That whole situation has changed in a lot of countries. Now the majority of students stay on. And so that exam that happened at the end of Year 10 or Year 9 that gave them their, if you like, a certificate to leave to go to work, a lot of countries have done away with that, don't have that anymore. They might issue a certificate to leave, but 80-90% of students stay on, even if they're not going to university. And in some countries, they have legislation to say that you can't leave until you're 17 years of age, or that you have to finish the final year of Year 12. Many countries have now established that requirement. Okay, we might move soon to an early break if that's possible, Rasa and Irina. What it could mean is we still have 5-minute break, but it means we've got a bit more time in our groups. What I'll do is I'll go through now the task. What do you see as the strengths and limitations in the structures of these that you were shown? You can see the countries there, and we've got Lithuania down the bottom. So you might want to talk about that first, what you see as your strengths and limitations. And then, from the individuals in your group, were there any of these that you heard that you liked, that you were impressed with, that you thought, I like that? You may not like all of it, but there's something about it that you liked in that. So what we're going to do is have a break. How was it, Andreas?
Well,
good discussion?
I think yes, very important. Nice mind was said about education in different states, different countries, different practices.
Yeah, yeah. What do you do, Andres? What's your area in education?
In this group?
Yeah, in your, what do you do normally, your normal job?
In normal job, I work in Ministry of Education and national minorities, my areas.
Ah, okay. National minorities. So this is
in education context.
Student groups that are
in secondary school and secondary education.
Migrants as well. I just add, because we work together with Andrius, he's my colleague. So yeah, we have a national minority, Polish minority, Russian minority, and they have all those issues related to their education and languages and then things like that.
Okay, yeah. Okay, look, we got 64 back, so everyone's back. Irina, we've only got a little while now before we break for lunch. So why don't you start? All I guess I want to know at this stage, I mean, I'm hoping the people that were chairing those groups will be able to give you the feedback outside of this session now, later. But what would you like to say? What was at the top of your discussion? What were the positive things you heard?
You're asking me, Phil? Sorry.
Yeah. Were you one of the reporters or no?
No, it's okay. I am one of the reporters as well. Yeah, I'd love to hear what other people were talking about. But in our view, the general idea, the general message, the main message from our group is that we don't need to do very drastic changes in our system. We should evaluate what works well in our system, and based on that, to strengthen those points and focus on what does not work well, and just to see how it is solved in other countries, these problematic issues, and seek for possible solutions. But we don't have to do very dramatic changes at this point, because teachers are very tired, and it's not a good time maybe for dramatic changes, and we are not sure if we really need them, because we have some in our system, we have something that function well. So it's important to keep them, to strengthen them, and based on that to build our upper secondary education. So this is, well, we talked a lot about the assessment, about examinations, so we should not demonize them. There was one message also, because it should become an integral part of our of learning process. We should not be afraid of them, but of course to rethink them, maybe content, form, and moderation, teacher judgment and moderation is one of the issues that could be maybe implemented. But well, so
yeah, improving consistency of teachers' judgment when they make assessments. Yeah. Okay. Is Vanus, are you telling me which group is next?
Vainai.
Or Rosa. Or Rasa.
I'm sorry, but nobody takes this role. So we've just returned, my group, so I'm not sure that I know who is next, because I'm just asking to be volunteer somebody. Irina, we don't hear you. You are telling something very important, but we don't hear you.
I was group 6, and now the turn for group 5 then.
Okay, thank you very much. And who is representing group 5? And it will appear that it's me.
You, Asta, it's you.
It's you.
I'm really sorry that I am lost like in fog, but I had an excellent group, and I'm not overrating these people because they were representing quite different institutions and different approaches. And I liked the idea of Jūratė Litvinaitė, who told that we don't have to take just the examples which we like. We just have to look at the systems of different countries like to the system. If we want to say that there are some kind of positive aspects, we just have to look at them, how close they are to our approaches, to our discussions, to our willingness to change. Because Salomea, who represents National Agency for Education, she claimed that we have to think not only about the law regulations, but also about our understanding. If we go to rapid and radical changes, our teachers, our system won't be ready to implement. Another idea which we liked and which we highlighted, the credit system. We liked the idea that different countries have a small amount of compulsory subjects because it shows that the country itself has the culture of education. It means that we don't have to make our subjects compulsory to force them be important in the society. The third idea which we liked on the assessment field was that the procedure of moderation of internal assessment, because we are also using this procedure in our discussions as the possibility, because it is the opportunity to merge internal activities on the level of process and also the standardization of these processes with external assessment. So in short way, I would like to highlight a few keywords: systematical approach, time to be ready for these changes, and moderation of external assessment, and if it is possible, to create the culture of necessity to learn not according to the law, not to force them to learn, but just to find new culture, new approach, how to make this important to our society.
Okay, so some consistency there with Irina's group too, about particularly about moderation and consistency of teacher judgment. Okay, which group next?
The fourth.
Number 4.
Who represents the group 4?
It's me. Hello, everyone.
Oh, hi, Rima. Yeah.
I represent group number 4, and we had very interesting discussions, lots of information, and now I'm struggling to concentrate it in few sentences. Talking about experiences of other countries, the most time of discussions took transition year. That was quite interesting for us to hear. We had fans and not fans of it. That was quite a good idea for children to choose if they want to check themselves, if they're ready enough for academic paths to take after the secondary education, and to check if they are ready enough. But this idea has quite a lot of limitations in Lithuania. We have quite a long secondary education, not only secondary, our education system, children stay in it 12 years. With compulsory preschool, it's 13 years. If we take one more year, transition class, that's 14 years of being in education system before higher education or vocational education, quite a long time. Another idea was that our children want to leave school as soon as possible, and they won't be fond of the idea to stay additional year in it. It might be very attractive for them. So these are the limitations of good idea, and we will have to discuss all of them. Another idea was how to get into secondary education. Should we have any exams or it should be open entrance for everyone? And the most time took the discussion talking about after basic education, we have a kind of exam, not exam, but we check the results of our children, but it doesn't have a very big influence after that. We check their achievements, their results, and we do not do anything with this later on, anything. So it should be accounted as a barrier or way to check if children are ready for secondary education. That took quite a long time for discussion. And we like the idea of Ireland where children at secondary education have a limited number of subjects. So we think that it would be good for Lithuania to check this idea to reduce the number of subjects children are learning at secondary education. That is in a very short version of our discussions.
Irina, how many groups have we got?
3. Still 3 groups ahead.
To go. Will we keep going even though we're breaking into lunchtime?
Let's finish with the groups. Yeah, people are ready. So just very short. I asked them to be very short. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Asta, dėmesio.
I'll tell everything in English. Here is like exam for me, you know?
Yes, you're being assessed.
Everybody's happy.
We'll be very kind. We'll be very caring.
Gal ir pasikartosiu, mūsų grupėje iš tikrųjų klausydami pavyzdžius į tokius 3 aspektus atkreipiame dėmesį. Tai yra į proceso organizavimą. Kitas dalykas, antras aspektas kaip turininis, tai yra galimybė pasirinkti atskirus dalykus, tai yra iš turinio. Ir trečias, tai yra būtent vidurinio ugdymo sertifikavimas. Čia ir kartu įeina ir vertinimas.
This group highlighted 3 aspects: the organization of the process of education, the ability to choose subjects, and assessment of the stage.
Tačiau išskyrėme kai kurių šalių stipriuosius, kai kuriuos aspektus iš tų 3 mano paminėtų. Tai yra Suomijos galimybė pasirinkti daugybę siūlomų kursų, tą gausą ir lankstumą.
I'm sorry, I've just Finland, ability to choose a lot of courses and flexibility of the very process.
Ne vienas diskusijos narys pabrėžė, kad puikiai galimybė Suomijoje yra išsilaikyti, atsiskaityti, išsilaikyti dalyko egzaminą ne po, turiu galvoj anksčiau, sakykime, 11 klasiai.
And this flexibility reflects in that student is able to get the result of exam during the process of learning, but not at the end of the secondary education.
Suomijos trūkumas yra, kad tokį procesą vidurinio ugdymo organizuoti yra sudėtinga.
But it is really difficult to organize such process of education.
sužavėjo pietų Australijos galimybė mokiniams mokytis tuo tyriamuoju aspektu.
The example of South Australia is really attractive in the aspect of ability to learn and to use the research approach in the educational process.
Airijoje mes matome privalumus, kad yra mažai privalomų dalykų ir skirtingų lygių sertifikavimai, čia gal jau ir kartojosi. Tačiau minusas yra, kad tie 4 metai kaip ir per ilgas yra tarpas tokiam amžiuje mokytis.
They highlight the advantages of Ireland, which were mentioned before, that there are a small amount of subjects and ability to get the results in 3 different levels. But the disadvantage which is seen by this group is the time period of learning. 4 years is too long period for the secondary education.
Britų Kolumbijoje išskyrėm kaip privalumą galimybę laikyti egzaminą kelis kartus. 3 kartus, ten atrodo, tai buvo.
And in British Columbia, they see that the idea to have ability to pass the exam in 3 times is the best maybe advantage of the system.
Apie Singapūrą. Žavi švietimo sistemos pati bazė, tiek žmogiškųjų išteklių, tiek kietoji, tai yra stiprus mokytojai, stiprus akademinis mokymasis. Tačiau maža lankstumo ir nėra galimybės pereiti, sakykime, jeigu mokinys patiria nesėkmę.
In Singapore, we stress this academical approach, but there is no ability to change the learning path, and there are no flexibility.
Yeah, it's very heavily determined. Yeah. Okay, we're going to have to finish up soon.
Reiktų jau pabaigti. Gal tada jau...
Taip, ir labai trumpai. Naujosios Zelandijos privalumas yra vieninga vertinimo sistema, tai yra tų standartų turėjimas. Bet man atrodo, jau sakė kažkas.
New Zealand standards, they just highlight the idea of standards.
Okay, okay. Will we finish up here and go to someone else? Yeah.
O apie Lietuvą trumpai, kad yra privalumas, yra tie valstybiniai egzaminai ir jų alternatyvos, brandos darbas ir kartu baigti vidurinį ugdymą įgyjant ir profesiją.
And the Lithuanian case has the advantages that there are abilities to finish school with matura exams or the alternative project work, and at the same time student could get the certificate which has 2 sides. Secondary education on the academical level and vocational training also.
Yes, yeah. I'm glad. Sorry, I'm glad I didn't cut you off before you talked about about Lithuania. Thank you. Who have we got next?
Maybe I from second group, and I will share my table. It will be faster to say pluses and minuses of this system of education. So,
Andriu, ar galiu paprašyti labai trumpai tiesiog apibendrinti?
Taip. Finland, it was very nice that they pupils can to choose between, and minus is to that inequality between schools, that they don't have possibility to give big content of subjects. Australia. So it's very clear and very good system built on credits and the possibility to choose. And what would be minuses, that pupil, it may be it's not mature enough to choose subjects, and professional education, it is not in this context, as I understand. So Ireland, it's very good that people have possibility to have transition and to have, how to say, can see what they do in practice, and every pupil can to change or correct what wrong he done. And for us was very difficult to evaluate what is minuses of structure. So British Columbia minus courses are very short. And what is good that pupil can take exam in the same exam in the period of 1 year. And also what is good to its possibility to choose a lot of subjects. Then Singapore, it what is minus very strict possibility to choose. And what is a good thing that it is there are a lot of subjects. New Zealand, as minus, not minus, can be that there is no subjects who must people learn, and there are not exams, and what is good to evaluation, moderate evaluation of when we look at standards. And Lithuania, in the main body of subjects, there are a lot of subjects. All education are oriented in higher school education and universities. And also, what is minuses, that our system, there's a minuses, and what is plus, that our system are oriented in high school and university education. So that's all.
Okay, thank you. Last group before we break for lunch. We got one more group.
Hello, everybody. Yes.
Left the village.
Topic was, yes, topic was very, very huge.
Now you're keeping everyone from lunch, Rimantas, so you need to be very clear.
Okay. The main foreign experience which made for us, which was for us very interesting, this was experience of Ireland of transitional year, and we agreed that in Lithuania it would be very, very useful to have this transitional year, because students, when they enter upper secondary education, they are in very different levels, and it is not easy for them to study together. And then we have in Lithuania so many mandatory subjects. It should be a little bit less, and instead we should have more possibilities to choose. But nobody from Lithuanian side suggests radical changes in Lithuania.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's we've got some very consistent views there, and also some things that people are interested in, with maybe not the exact model, but maybe, you know, like the transition year, maybe we could think of alternatives to that, something that it might achieve the same end, but doesn't involve a whole year. We can, you know, work towards that towards the end of our 4 days together. Okay, we're going to break. And what time do we come back, Rena?
If I may ask my colleagues to come back at 1, as it was agreed. Is that okay? We will have only 45 minutes instead of 1 hour for lunch.